Long ago, in a kingdom tucked between rolling emerald hills and rivers that shimmered like ribbons of glass, there lived a young prince whose heart was as restless as the wind and as pure as the dawn. The kingdom was prosperous, its people content, its valleys green and fertile, but in the heart of the royal castle the prince found little peace. He was clever and kind, admired by nobles and villagers alike, yet one longing gnawed quietly at his spirit, the longing to find a true princess to share his life and heart. Now many would think such a quest simple, for the world is not short of princesses. But the prince had grown up hearing his mother, the queen, speak of a truth that had settled deep in his soul. A true princess, she had said, is not known by her crown or gown or lineage, but by the gentleness of her heart, the honesty in her words, and the rarest treasure of all, the sensitivity of her soul. The young prince had carried those words like a torch through his youth, refusing to marry for power, for beauty, or for advantage. He wanted a woman who could see beyond luxury, who could feel the whisper of a wounded bird's wing or the sorrow hidden behind a smile. And so, when he came of age, he made a vow before the court that he would not rest until he had found such a princess, one whose heart was true, whose spirit was kind, and whose soul was attuned to even the faintest tremor of the world's quiet music. The queen, wise and watchful, kissed his brow and wished him courage, for she knew that such purity was rare in courts gilded with pride. Thus began his journey. The prince set forth across seas that glittered like liquid sapphires beneath the sun, and through forests so ancient the air itself seemed heavy with the breath of forgotten gods. He climbed the frostbitten peaks of the north, where even eagles gasped for air, and wandered through markets that sang with color, silks that shimmered like rainbows, spices whose scent could stir dreams, and songs that told of distant loves. Everywhere he went, he sought not riches or thrones, but hearts. He met princesses from the east, west, and farthest islands of the world. There was Princess Valeria of the Eastern Isles, whose beauty rivaled the sea at sunrise, and whose pearl necklaces could blind a man with their shine. She smiled sweetly, but when the prince spoke of her fishermen who toiled for her luxuries, she yawned and reached for another mirror. Her eyes held the glitter of wealth, but not the warmth of compassion. The prince thanked her with grace, and his heart sinking a little lower beneath the weight of disappointment. Then he traveled to the icy north, where Princess Seraphina awaited him, a woman of fierce intellect, hair white as snow, eyes sharp as shards of frozen glass. She could quote poets in 5 languages, duel with a sword, and play the harp so delicately it could draw tears from marble statues. Yet her laughter was rare, and her gaze guarded, as though 1,000 walls stood between her soul and the world. The prince admired her brilliance, but felt the cold of her distance, a chill deeper than winter itself. And so he left, once again alone beneath the stars. He next ventured to the golden deserts, where the sun painted the dunes with copper light. There he met Princess Amara, whose laughter rang like bells, and whose beauty could turn even the harshest day into song. She was lively and fearless, but when he teased her gently about her love of jewels, her face hardened. A princess must have only the finest things, she declared proudly. Anything less is unworthy. Her words, sharp as sand in the wind, told the prince all he needed to know. Months turned into seasons, seasons into nearly a year. Every kingdom offered him wonders, yet none offered him the soul he sought. He returned home weary, his heart heavy as his empty saddlebag. The people rejoiced at his return. The banners flew, the bells rang, and the villagers filled the streets to greet their wandering prince. But as the cheers faded and the torches dimmed, the palace fell quiet again. The prince resumed his duties, training with knights, visiting towns, presiding over councils. Yet every night he found himself staring out his window toward the horizon, as if searching for someone the world itself had hidden. The queen watched him silently, her mother's heart sensing his quiet sorrow. She did not press him, but often found him by the great fire, lost in thought as the flames danced before his distant eyes. Patience, my son, she would say softly. Even destiny needs time to find its way through the storm. It was on one such stormy night that fate came knocking, quite literally, upon the castle gates. The wind howled like a restless spirit, the rain lashed against stone, and thunder rolled through the valley like the voice of the gods themselves. The prince and the queen sat near the fire, speaking little, when a knock echoed through the great hall. The guards hesitated, for who could be out on such a night? But the knock came again, faint but insistent. The queen, her eyes glinting with intuition, commanded, "Open the gates!"
You're just jealous
When
of
the
my
doors
room.
creaked apart, lightning lit the courtyard, and there, drenched from head to toe, stood a young woman. Her gown, once fine, was torn by wind and mud. Her hair clung to her pale cheeks. Yet there was something in her bearing, even in her exhaustion, that spoke of grace. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. "I am Princess Ilara," she said. "I have traveled from a distant land. My father's throne is under threat, and I was sent away in secret for my safety. Bandits attacked us. I have lost my guards, my carriage, everything, save my name and my spirit. Please, may I come in from the storm?" The queen's brow furrowed. "Many have claimed the title of princess," she said carefully. "How are we to know if your words are true?" Ilara met her gaze without fear. "You may believe me or not," she replied quietly, "but I cannot change who I am." There was no arrogance in her tone, only a calm, weary honesty. The queen nodded to the servants. "Bring her in, warm her, give her food and dry clothes." Then, when Ilara had eaten and spoken no more than courtesy demanded, the queen turned to her son. "My dear, if this woman is who she says she is, perhaps fate has answered in its own way. But there is one thing I must be sure of. That night, as the storm raged beyond the windows, the queen devised her famous test. From the royal pantry she fetched a single green pea, small, round and ordinary. "Place this," she told the maids, "upon the bedstead in the guest chamber. Over it stack 20 mattresses and 20 feather beds." The servants blinked in disbelief, but obeyed. By the time they finished, the bed rose so high it nearly brushed the ceiling. When Princess Ilara was shown home, she looked up at the towering bed and laughed softly, despite her fatigue. "I fear I'll need a ladder," she said, her humor gentle and self-mocking. The maids helped her climb, and soon she lay down, whispering thanks. Yet as she turned to rest, a faint discomfort stirred beneath her. She shifted once, twice, but could not find peace. Something small, sharp, insistent, pressed against her side no matter how she moved. The night was long and restless. She fluffed her pillows, turned this way and that, and sighed into the darkness, wondering if perhaps she was simply too weary to sleep at dawn. When the first gold of sunrise touched the curtains, she descended the ladder with shadows beneath her eyes. The queen awaited her in the breakfast hall, the prince beside her, both watching closely. "How did you sleep, my lord?" the queen asked, her tone mild. Ilara hesitated, then spoke the truth. "Not well, I'm afraid. There was something hard in the bed. I could hardly close my eyes all night." For a moment, silence hung like mist between them. Then the queen's lips curved into a knowing smile. "So it is true," she murmured. The prince looked from his mother to Ilara, confusion in his eyes. "What is true?" he asked. The queen reached into her sleeve and drew forth the tiny pea, holding it between her fingers. "This," she said softly, "was placed beneath 20 mattresses and 20 feather beds. Only one with the finest, purest sensitivity of body and of soul could have felt it. My son, she is a true princess." The prince's heart leapt, but not merely at the proof. It was Ilara herself who stirred him. Her honesty, her quiet courage, her refusal to feign comfort or to pretend for favor. In her eyes, he saw sincerity, warmth, and the kind of strength that does not boast. She did not speak like one accustomed to praise. She spoke like one accustomed to truth. From that morning on, the castle changed. The storm cleared. Sunlight spilled once more through the great windows. The prince and Ilara walked the gardens together, talking long into the afternoons. They spoke not only of kingdoms, but of small things, of how flowers turned their faces to light, of how a river carries stories from one valley to the next, of how laughter can mend more than a crown ever could. Servants whispered of how the prince's laughter returned, how the halls, once heavy with silence, now echoed with warmth. Weeks passed, and the bond between them deepened. The queen, observing from afar, saw the calm in her son's gaze and the grace in the girl's manners. There was no vanity in Ilara, no hunger for display. She spent hours with the castle's children, telling stories of her homeland, and visited the stables to thank the grooms who cared for the horses. To every person, from noble to servant, she spoke with respect. And slowly, the prince understood why the old stories called sensitivity a royal virtue. It was not weakness but awareness of others, of life, of the fragile threads that weave humanity together. When word reached Ilara's homeland that she was safe, her parents, the king and queen, sent envoys with gifts and blessings. Her cousin's rebellion had failed. Peace had returned. The distant kingdom rejoiced to learn that their daughter had found not only refuge, but love. And so, one clear spring morning, the prince knelt before her in the royal garden. "Ilara," he said, his voice trembling not with fear, but with the magnitude of what he felt. "I have traveled every corner of the world, searching for a princess worthy of my heart. Yet it was fate that brought you to my door on a night when hope was nearly gone. You have shown me that true nobility is not born of blood but of soul. Will you be my queen?" Ilara's eyes glistened. "If I am to be queen," she whispered, "let it be to serve beside a king who listens to his heart." And so she said yes. The wedding was celebrated with joy across the kingdom. Bells rang. Flowers spilled from balconies. Musicians filled the air with music bright as sunlight. The people cheered, not only for their prince and his bride, but for the love that had grown from honesty, humility, and faith. The queen, proud and serene, placed a crown of gold and ivy upon Ilara's head, declaring before all, "Behold the true princess, one who feels, one who cares, one who reminds us that greatness begins in the heart." As the years passed, their reign became known as the Era of Harmony. The kingdom flourished under their rule. Art and laughter bloomed as freely as spring flowers, and travelers spoke of a land where kindness was law. In the royal treasury, beneath crystal glass, the small green pea rested in a golden box, not for its worth, but for its lesson, and every time the prince and princess passed it, they would smile, remembering that love had found them not through grandeur or power, but through a single moment of truth tested by a pea. Thus their story endured, whispering through generations, like the soft turning of a page, that the truest royalty is not worn upon the brow, but carried quietly within the soul. And so the prince and princess Ilara, bound by sincerity and love, lived not only happily ever after, but wisely, kindly, and well.